a great marriage is two people who choose to prioritize each other, and they are intentional about their relationship with this person, and they see their life going forward as going to be with this person. Like, I'm with you and you're with me. The other things, those are all side items. We have our world together, and we're going to live in this world together, and the rest of everything else can just figure it out. But this is what is core in my life. And so when you have people who think of it that way, even if it's not always magic, it's not always sunshine, and it's not always passion, if that is how they view it, then they have a really good chance at living together for the rest of their lives.
Hello, and welcome to Discovering True Health, your weekly deep dive into health and wellness. Thank you so much for joining us today. So today we're going to be discussing the intricate dynamics of modern marriages, exploring both the challenges they face and keys to creating a lasting, fulfilling partnership. Joining me is one of my favorite relationship coaches, Lee Wilson, who is also known as Coach Lee. He's a world-renowned relationship expert and coach who helps people get their ex back after a breakup, saves marriages, and helps people become more attractive. He's lectured at Pepperdine University and others. He's a TED Talk educator on the science of relationships, and has authored several books. So thank you so much for joining me today, Coach Lee. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you.
Thank you for having me, Christy. I'm excited too.
So first, let's kind of start with the basics. How would you define a successful and happy marriage?
Well, a lot of people have different views on what a relationship is. Some people think that it's just two independent people who happen to meet up every now and then. But when we're talking about marriage, it's really a different level. And that's something that we need to be telling our kids more, that, marriage is something that really it's not just something you happen to look into, but you plan, even from being a child, that you would plan, one day I want to get married. And so a great marriage is not just two people who happen to really like each other and really have this amazing Hollywood type of connection that we see in the movies, but a great marriage is two people who choose to prioritize each other, and they are intentional about their relationship with this person, and they see their life going forward as going to be with this person. Like, I'm with you and you're with me. The other things, those are all side items. We have our world together, and we're going to live in this world together, and the rest of everything else can just figure it out. But this is what is core in my life. And so when you have people who think of it that way, even if it's not always magic, it's not always sunshine, and it's not always passion, if that is how they view it, then they have a really good chance at living together for the rest of their lives, because the other things will usually fall into place.
That's so beautiful. Yeah, I recently did a personal development course, and it was a lot of these mindset shifts around relationships and coming up with your life vision of what your love relationship would look like. And what you just said, it's so helpful to have that vision and plan, of and the decisions, deciding. So there's like, you're deciding to be with this person, like you said. It's so vital. Now, our world is very, very different from what it was even 5 years ago. All this new technology, then all the social media comes into play, and there's all these, everything's different. So what are some of the common challenges you say that modern marriages often face?
Well, as much as, just like most people, I do enjoy social media. It's a great way to keep up with my family, with my brothers and his kids. It's a great way to share your opinion and get some messages out there. And of course, for me, it's very important for business, for getting the word out about courses and workshops that I have. But in terms of what it's done to relationships, social media has been a disaster, mostly because, just to give you an example of something that happened with a client yesterday, and of course, I never reveal my clients' names or identifying information, but basically, this person has a spouse who's been keeping up with an ex through Facebook. And that's not something that would have been easy to do, say 15, 20 years ago. It would have been almost as easy to just never talk to them again and focus on your marriage and your life. But with dating apps and social media, and Facebook has their own, dating site now, or dating app to the service.
Oh, wow.
And there's certainly nothing wrong with that as far as just the basics of it, trying to help people meet each other. But just like with a lot of things, it depends on the people involved, because a lot of people, and this, in my opinion, is one of the worst things facing marriages right now, is that we have developed a catalog mentality when it comes to people. And what I mean is that we're convinced that we can turn the knobs, turn the dials, and we can find this perfect person. They check all our boxes. That's something people say now. He checks all my boxes, or she checks all my boxes. And so the temptation's always there, especially when you're dating. Well, if this guy says something I don't like, if this girl does this, I can just go right back to the catalog. I can turn a few more knobs and I can get somebody who's just absolutely perfect for me, when that's really not the reality of it. And we tend to think of it that way. I can just go back to the catalog. Whereas if we go back even 50 years ago, especially beyond that, you were in a town and your selection of people to date and to marry was basically, who do you know in this town, and who does your family know, who does the local preacher recommend if you're single and looking. And so your options were fairly limited, and you accepted that. This person, I like the way that he does this. He's a good provider. I think he's handsome. The men might say, well, she's pretty, and she's got a good family, and that's good enough for me, and I want to have kids. It was pretty simple. And they did not create these relationships that walked on eggshells. And that's one of the things people are often surprised when I say it, because there are lots of coaches out there and there are lots of people who speak about relationships. And I usually have a lot of criticism for those people, because I think they make it really complicated. Sometimes I'll have people who are clients of mine, and they'll start describing elements of their relationship, and their phrases, you can tell that they're kind of these modern worded things that wouldn't have been said 20 or 30 years ago, but they're describing, like, I need him to show up for me in this way. I'm like, what does that mean? Because I hear that and I know what it means, but these expressions like this, and we tend to overcomplicate relationships to where they have to do so much for us that really relationships were never intended to do. And this kind of pressure would not have been on relationships, say 50, 60 years ago. You go to a married couple 60 years ago in the 1800s, 1700s, and pretty much just go all the way back to the dawn of man. And if you went to a wife and you said, why are you married to this man? She would say, well, he's a good provider, and he's good to me, and he's a good father to our kids, and I think he's handsome, and we get along. That would probably be the length of it. They might not even go that deep. It might just be, he's a good provider, he's good to me, and he's a good dad to our kids. Those were the important things. And so as far as the relationship sort of being almost like a third party, it's like me and him and the relationship itself, like it's its own organism, where it was supposed to provide all these things and have magic in these moments, and always do the right thing that you want to have done in that moment, and even read your mind, which a lot of what people say now about relationships equates to two people who are mind readers. And it's completely ridiculous. And so when we're talking about just what do modern marriages face, they face extreme complexity and expectations on relationships that really our minds, our hearts were not able to we're not able to do the things that a lot of people think should come from a relationship. And we need to simplify. It seems like everyone's trying to make it more complicated and more complicated, and expect more of their relationship and expect more of the person. And the thing is, the world's going to make it complicated. What you need from a spouse is someone who can be your peace. The rest of the world is crazy. You may feel like you can't win with the rest of the world. You need to feel like you can win with this person. And one of the things that I remember speaking about actually with a coach on my staff who works for me now. And this was his ex-wife from 20 years ago. It was good that that marriage ended, and I don't say that often. But one time he told me he was driving in his car and he got a phone call that his grandmother had passed away. And he said, I was driving home and my first thought was, this is bad, but my wife's going to make it worse. Can you imagine? Yeah. And so that marriage didn't survive. Surprise, surprise.
Mm.
Because you should feel like that when the rest of the world is on your case, that you can go to your spouse and they've got your back and you can win with them. And here's the other thing that people are going to just drop their jaws at. It should be easy
Mm.
with them. If you want to be a good spouse, be easy. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, don't give your spouse a hard time. Make it to where they think no matter what's going on, if I go to them, they can help me feel better. It's really that simple. That's what you need from a spouse. You don't need someone who challenges you, who pushes you, who calls you out. You don't really even need someone, quote, who makes you a better person. That's not their job.
Yeah.
Their job is to love you. And that's something that Billy Graham's wife actually said. They said, do you think you made Billy a better person? And she said, that wasn't my job. My job was to love him. And when I heard that, I thought, this marriage, what, were they married 60 years? Something like that? That's why, because they didn't make this so complicated. So modern marriages face this idea that relationships are supposed to just be this magical Rubik's cube of complexity. And we've created a lot of nightmares and marriages that people want to leave.
Wow. Yes, that was profound. It's so true. We hear all these, like you were saying, the should push each other and call each other out. I mean, we hear that a lot, and you're absolutely right. That's our job personally. Our personal development is to do that, and our self-mastery is to do that. Let's scroll back a little bit to social media. I hear from friends a lot of different issues with social media. They start dating somebody, they're serious. Well, he's not friending me on social media. What do I do? Or he's not posting pictures of us on social media, or she's not posting pictures of them. There's all these like minor complications with social media that come up that I've heard time and time again from people. How do you suggest navigating social media with serious relationships?
Well, you really need to have some conversations about it. And, that's something where it's a cliche that communication is just the most important thing in your marriage. And it's not. Sometimes people need to shut up. But when it comes to this, you at least have to understand the expectations, because for some people, this is announcing to the world what their life is like. And so if you have a boyfriend, if you have a girlfriend or a husband or a wife, then you should be able to announce to the world, this is my life, this is my person. And so it can be concerning when the person that you're with is not telling the world about you. So I completely get that. And what I would suggest is that you first of all understand how the other person views social media, because some people don't use it much. I talk to people who just say, I might post once or twice a month, and it's because I think I should, but I don't really get into it. And so you kind of want to know that. But when it comes down to it, ask yourself, what's more important? The view of these other people as far as how they see you, or this person who you might marry or you're very serious about? And so if they are feeling like that they're not being announced to the world as your person, or that they're being hidden from these people that that's a problem, and you don't want them to feel that way. And so posting a simple picture of the two of you or something like that shouldn't be a problem. Now, if the person has had some difficulty in relationships in the past, maybe, and they're kind of leery about telling people they're dating because they don't know if it's going to last, that's a little bit concerning, but it's understandable. But when it all comes down to it, if the person you're with and you love is saying, why do you not put me on social media? Why are you hiding me? Then you need to put their picture up. I mean, if it's that important to them. And that's another area where a lot of kind of the modern, I guess I'd even say progressive relationship advice is sort of where you try to live these completely independent lives from each other, and that the other person is just supposed to accept that as though he or she has no say in it. That's ridiculous as well. And so if it bothers the other person, if they've asked about it, especially if they put pictures of you, do that, because it can be quite painful when this other person is not even telling the world about you and is keeping you a secret. That can cause the other person to feel distant from you and suspicious. It can wreck the relationship. It can start the dominoes. So there's just no need. And either you have social media or you don't. And if you do, then you have to kind of play the game. You have to go with what people expect. And it's not a big deal. So if it's a big deal to your partner, then you need to put it up there. Put a picture of you two together smiling and say, this is my girlfriend or this is my boyfriend. And we had a great time at the movies. Whatever you need to do. And it's another one of those things where don't complicate this. Don't try to get all defensive and say, well, I don't put people on social media, or I don't post that much, or try to make it complicated more so than it is. Just do it. It's simple. And a lot of people need to do that with issues in a relationship. If it matters to them, don't overcomplicate it. Just go with it. Just do it.
Love that. Modern complications. It's gotten so ridiculous with all these minor details. Now, are there specific cultural or social factors that you've observed affecting modern marriages, and how can couples address them?
Well, one of them is kind of this college age phenomenon of this time in my life is supposed to be where I party and I create these epic memories that I've seen in movies and stuff like that. And if I don't, I'm missing out on life. And so what happens is you get two people who are in a relationship in their early 20s, which that's a lot older than we kind of make it out to be. And again, we go back 100 years, 50 years, those are adults and they were expected to have jobs, to provide income and all that. And now they kind of go through this phase where college is being paid for by their parents or the government or whatever. And they kind of feel like, well, this is my time because I have a little bit of independence. Basically, it means that my parents can't tell me what to do because I'm not around them as much. And so I'm going to go live it up and party and try to experience all these things. And a lot of it is having sex with a lot of people. And a lot of times you get people who are at that age where they can have commitments and they can feel that they want to be in this relationship. And then the other person, a lot of times it's pressure from other students and their friends, but they feel like if they're tied down to one person that they're missing out. And so they can leave this relationship. They can even be kind of suckered away into they're supposed to go get this specific degree at this specific school and it's on the other side of the country. And so I'm going to leave the person I'm with to go do that. And somehow we're going to try to make it, but it hardly ever lasts. I hate to say, long distance relationships are difficult. And really, if you think about it, I remember a friend of mine who wanted to go to a great school up in the north called Penn State. He ended up at Mississippi State because the price was so much less. And he was really disappointed about it until he said it was the day that they were getting their textbooks. And he had a sibling who was at Penn State, if I remember right. And he said we had the same textbooks, same ones. It didn't really matter where he was, same textbook. And it all comes down to what you do with the situation you're in. And yet people will leave relationships and go to the other side of the country for things that really, if we're being honest, they don't matter. No one cares what school you went to. I hire people in my organization all the time. In the last couple of years, I've hired close to 15 people. And you know what? I have never asked. I've never said, well, where did you go to school? Tell me about college. I just want to know what they've done. What have you done that can impress me, that can help my organization? And so that's something that young adults face is this, if you have a close relationship with someone and you think that this could be the one for you and that you could marry this person, put them first. Put them first. I don't care what time period is in your life. Trust me, in a few years, you're going to think it was silly that you made that big a deal about a little small chunk of time that you spent at a college. And it really doesn't matter where you go, to be honest. So if it's about a person, then it's about the person and not the place. And, people face that with their careers as well, especially, and this will get into a little bit of something that's maybe not politically correct, but a lot of times when a husband and wife have separate careers and they're going in separate directions and they're exhausted and they come home at the end of the day that's a difficult situation to be in. They give each other the scraps. And so traditionally we had the the wife, who was also going to be the mother at some point most of the time, who was a homemaker. She might work here and there on the side to bring a little extra income, but her main focus was the home. And it was seen as a beautiful thing. You're serving your family, just like the husband was serving his family by going to work and finding a way to provide and being a protector. And so now we're in a situation where you have both people doing that, and they come home and the home has kind of been neglected because they're both working so much. And then we have kids, and we're telling modern women that they should make their career first and they should serve a corporation instead of their family, that somehow it's beneath them or that it's not as important to serve their family, but to go serve a corporation who could fire them at any moment and not think a thing about it and not feel any loyalty to them. But their family serving them, somehow that's seen as beneath her. And that's just not how it is. And that's another problem facing modern marriages is there. It's amazing to me. I will have sessions with couples, married couples, and one or both of them want a divorce. And one of the things I will say, and when they put it into practice, sometimes they'll say, "Where did you come up with this?" And I'll say, "I didn't, but let me tell you what it is." I'll listen to a couple describe how stressful their life is and their marriage is together. And it's anxiety and it's dread and it's fighting and bickering. And then, we got to take the kids here and take the kids there, all this busyness and complication. And I'll say, well, you two are obviously struggling. I imagine you're open to trying something different. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're open to anything. Okay. Well, if your career is not just like the dream of your life, and I'm speaking to the wife, how would you feel about walking away from it and becoming a homemaker and a full-time homemaker, full-time mother, full-time wife? And he could provide, and he would take that off your plate. You wouldn't have to worry about earning income for your family, and you would make the home a peaceful place for you, for him, and for the kids. And you would commit to that. That would be as important as a career as your career is now. And a lot of times I can kind of see uncomfortable looks on the husband's face, like, oh boy, this guy doesn't know her very well. I I've almost started to expect this to happen. A lot of times she will start crying,
Hmm.
and he's looking at her like, what's going on? And she'll finally say, that sounds wonderful if he's willing. And he'll say, well, yeah, I'm willing. I never thought you'd want to. She's like, I just got to get out from under the stress. We can't both be trying to do this. And um, then when they try it, it just seems wonderful. Most of them report just the stress goes way down. They get along better. And they'll say, where did you come up with this? And I was like, I didn't come up with this. People have been doing this for thousands of years. Our great grandparents weren't idiots, you know. And it's not, there's no oppression. There's no, well, this is above you, and so you shouldn't do that. There's none of that. It's not that we think, or that I think that women can't or shouldn't. And it's really not always going to be right for every couple, but for a lot of them, just going back to the traditional, I like to call it classical marriage roles, that people just seem to do so much better with that because we have enough complications in our life. A lot of us, we're facing Rubik's cubes every day of how to make things work and fit, and we've got to figure it out in time. And then we have these people who we call family, and they're getting our scraps. And we think, oh, but we can't miss out on careers because that's what we're told. And yet, when we start to simplify life and we focus on our family and this person that we're with, so many people just report, I didn't know it could be this easy. How many times have you heard that with a marriage relationship? It's pretty uncommon.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what they say when you just start to do some of the things that our grandparents knew instinctively. And so that's where we talk about modern marriage. And I want to ask sometimes, because people say that there's these experts and that we're kind of progressing to this I don't know, this thing with society, with relationships. We're progressing somewhere, I don't know where. But when you look around the world and the chaos, especially with our kids now, what's going on in schools, really, do we think that our grandparents apparently just didn't know very much because they didn't have this. The chaos that our kids are having to face on a daily basis, they didn't. Life was simpler. And if we can try to simplify our lives and get out of some of this animosity and complexity that we're in, society is going to turn around in so many different ways. We have stats all over the place. When you have a mother who has a full-time career, and don't get mad at me for this is just data, the chances of the kids being in abusive relationships skyrockets, of being abusers skyrockets, suffering from depression skyrockets, committing a felony skyrockets, doing drugs skyrockets. And that's the information we have. And when it comes down to it, are we going to say, well, because I want to be seen as modern, enlightened, whatever, am I going to sacrifice my kids at that altar so that I can wear a business suit, so that I can drive into the city to work and drive a Mercedes? Is that worth more than the kids? That's what we're going to have to start asking ourselves, because if you look around at the kids now, no offense to them, but we got problems. We have problems. And if it started in the home, which we were warned that, in the 80s and the 90s, the preachers would say, what are we going to do now that so many wives and mothers are leaving the home? What is it going to do? And people were just like, oh, it's no big deal. Well, we're seeing it now. It didn't work. And I don't think that modern society really has any credibility in this area anymore, and that we need to get back to the basics, because we're losing our people. We're losing our children.
Wow. Those are powerful points. And it's so true. Yeah, I mean, a couple of the points to what you were saying, you can definitely clearly see that the emotional kind of evolution is getting pushed back later and later in life. Like you were saying, the 20s, back in our grandparents' day, we used to, they were already married, they were already having kids. And like you said, it's this kind of delaying of emotional maturity. Now I feel like it's getting even pushed into the 30s and late 30s.
Right.
So yeah, it's so true. And the point about women, not working, it's I mean, as a woman, when you're out there dating, you feel the pressure of men ask, oh, so what do you do? It almost feels like men are looking for a breadwinner in a woman, a lot of times. So there is pressure on women from all places. And I 100% agree. If we can get back to the simpler times when there was less chaos, and, and the point with statistics with our children, I mean, wow, that is reason enough for us to make that shift.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing that you did just mention there, part of it is we are so mixed up when it comes to gender roles. Yeah. And should we have them? What are they? And we put both men and women in these impossible situations, because it's like, if I'm going to be expected to pay for everything, what are you going to do? And it's like, that is a fair question. And I actually had a woman yesterday who emailed me, and I'm scrolling emails, and it's like 2 sentences. So I checked it, even though I get a ton of emails, but I do like to respond to some of them. And she said, I really want to be a homemaker, but every man that I go out with, I mean, he wants me to pay my half and all that. How do I go about it? And I said, well, if you just say, hey, I want you to pay for my stuff, that's not going to work. But what if you said to him, well, for now, I do have a job and I'm working, but I would like to be a homemaker and support my husband and my kids, and I want to have a family. There are a lot of guys who will see that as a very enticing. The idea, for example, recently I was working with a married couple, and he wanted to leave. The husband wanted to leave. And so we had adapted some of these things, and she was really embracing being a homemaker. And I said, when he walks in the door, I said, this is going to sound bad, but I'm not sorry for it, because it's going to really help your family. What if most of the time, I know things get in the way and all that, but when that alarm clock goes off, what does he do? He jumps to it. He gets ready. He gets in the car, he goes to work. What if you took it that seriously with some of the things that you do around the house? So what if when he walked in the door, he smelled food,
Hmm.
from the kitchen, just this, and you were there, and welcome, glad you're back, hon. Give him a kiss. The kids are kind of running around the house. Hey, come over here, and you're all going to have a meal together. Does that sound that bad? Based on what the world is showing us, that sounds terrific. And she said, that does sound wonderful. And I said, walking in the door and there you are, and he smells the food. It's just such a nurturing environment. And who cares? Who cares what modern society thinks? Because we look around and it's chaos. They don't have any credibility to tell us how we should run our lives. If anything, they've run us into the ditch trying to follow after this modern nightmare, and it has nothing to do with better or superior or anything like that. It's, I have some things I'm going to do to make your life easier, to take some things off of your plate. You're going to do some things to take things off my plate, and I'm going to take care of me for you, and you're going to take care of you for me, and we're going to do our best to support each other. And if it was just that simple, the divorce rate would just plummet. So it's interesting to say some of these things, because a lot of relationship coaches, I think, are afraid to say it. I might have been years ago, but now that I've seen what works and just how much better it is for everyone involved, I'm not afraid to say it anymore. I think that it should go back to how we used to do it. We've made it too complicated, and we've sacrificed our children and our own sanity in a lot of situations.
We appreciate your courage. Another piece of that I had learned recently, it reminded me of, was it was the author of Men Are from Mars, Women Are from Venus, but he had written a newer book, and I watched a lecture on him, and he was talking about how when a woman is fully in her feminine and a man is fully in his masculine, and the woman is, behaving in ways inner feminine towards the man and vice versa, the woman actually physiologically boosts the man's testosterone when she's responding to him in a feminine way, and vice versa when he treats her in his masculine and does the same, her estrogen is boosted. So even at a physiological level, we're built for that dynamic.
Right. And some of that's is hormone based. We're talking about, for women especially, oxytocin, which is a bonding chemical, bonding hormone. And men produce oxytocin as well, but they also produce something called vasopressin, which basically, it's what make men kind of possessive. And I know that that's kind of been villainized in some ways, but let me tell you, in this world, it's a positive if your husband or your boyfriend looks at you and says, this is my girl, this is my wife, I want to take care of her, I want to protect her because she's mine, and she feels the same way, he's hers. There's nothing wrong with that. And so yes, when a man gets to fully express his masculinity and a woman gets to fully express her femininity, they bring those hormones out of each other. It is produced during sex, and it's also produced just when they're getting to do those things. So even the way that they hold each other, if you've ever noticed, a lot of times men and women, a woman will kind of lower herself and put her head here, and he'll kind of be higher. And that's, a lot of that is due to the way our bodies are built. Even the way we hold hands is based on different size muscles in our arms based on our sex. And just those small things like that can cause hormone productions that connect us to this person and that make the man want to protect her, want to provide, like, she's spoken for, don't you mistreat her, you answer to me. It's a beautiful thing. And I just wish that it was not pushed against so much, and that it could be embraced again. And I see that a lot. A lot of the younger people who come to me will even just kind of, where did you come up with this? Like, I didn't come up with this. Like, this is what life was like before you were here. This is how we did it when the world. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it's so true. Let's get into some strategies for maintaining long-term relationships. What are some effective strategies that you recommend for fostering emotional intimacy for long-term and sustaining that for long-term marriage and relationships?
Emotional intimacy. So Intimacy is where we share the facts and the feelings of our life, and the other person knows them, but they know how we feel about things. Just because something happened to you, you don't really learn a lot about the person based on what happened to them, but you learn a lot about them based on how they felt about it, how they responded to it. And so having those conversations, telling the story of your life. This is what happened when I was 7 and I fell out of my best friend's treehouse and broke my arm. And then I didn't get to play baseball. And it made me feel like I was a loser. It made me feel like my summer was wasted. Things like that. You learn about the other person. And in some ways, the word tells you what it is: intimacy, into me, see. And so, even though that's a little bit cheesy, it's a great way to look at it. You want the other person to be able to see into you. And so, over the years, first of all, what you need to make sure that you don't do, and I heard this first from Dr. Joe Beam. He said, don't teach the other person to lie to you. Like, what does that mean? Who would do that? It's when you punish someone for telling you the truth. Because going forward, they realize if I tell them the truth and they don't like it, they're going to pout, they're going to punish me, they're going to reject me, they're going to ignore me. And so people will hide. They won't tell you the truth. And not only do you become more distant because you're not telling this person the truth, but you also get more distant because they realize that you're holding back. They don't know as much about you. And so it harms the situation two ways. So that would be one of the first things that I say to people a lot. Don't punish the other person for telling you the truth. It may hurt. You may not like hearing it, but try to approach it as, where can we go from here? Let's work on this together. Let's go forward. Let's not dwell on this or the past. So that's one of the things that you can do. The other thing is, as I mentioned earlier, if you will decide that your duty in life to this person is to be their peace. So when everybody else is giving them a hard time, when the world is driving them insane, when they look at the news and they worry, you be their peace. You don't be the one who causes problems. You're not the one who's all over them about this or complaining about this or that. You're the one who is helping to make it better. And you're going to be the person they can talk to, and you're going to have a solution. I'm so sorry you had a bad day. Let's watch a movie together. I'll make popcorn. If you can keep it where you are their peace, and they know that. See, that's what's super important about this. What does the other person think when they think of you? Do they think of someone like in the show Everybody Loves Raymond? Do you remember how there was that moment where I believe it was the brother was saying that Ray had told him that when he would be coming home from work, sometimes he would circle the block 4 or 5 times because he just didn't want to go in and have to deal with her. In real life, do you think a marriage like that's going to last? Yeah, eventually he's just going to say, enough, and he's going to leave. And so what is the opposite of that? Like I told you about my friend who, when his grandmother died, his first thought was, she's just going to make it worse. His wife's going to make it worse. What if it's the opposite? What if you become the person that they go to when they have difficulty? They can help me. They can make me feel better. They can at least comfort me and hold me. They're not going to be my adversary. We're going to be on the same side of the table. So if you look at your marriage as you're a team, and people contribute differently to the team, that gets into what we were talking about earlier. Not everyone's the quarterback, not everyone's the receiver, not everyone's a lineman, but you've got to have all of them. They're all equally important. And if you all try to be the quarterback, like when I was early on in my life, half my life ago, when I was starting one of my first businesses, I was speaking to a very successful businessman, and he was asking me questions. And he finally said, I don't think that it's going to work like you think it is. I said, why? Because the way I had structured the business, he said, you've got to have a head. You've got to have a boss. He said, have you ever seen anything with 2 heads? And I said, I remember seeing a snake with 2 heads, but it lived like a month because it was mutated. Anyway, he said, so basically what you're telling me is anything that has 2 heads is a monster. I said, yeah. He said, we only see 2-headed things when they're 2-headed monsters, because it doesn't work. He said, you've got to have a boss. He said, who's the CEO? Because I was trying to make it where, it was with some friends I was building a business with, and I wanted us to kind of all have the same level of authority. And he said, that's a great thought. He said, but it's really naive and it's not going to work. Somebody's got to make a decision. And he was right. He was absolutely right, because that's, the way that I run my business now. I have several friends who work closely with me, but we all understand somebody's got to make the decisions, and we're not always going to agree. But that doesn't mean we're not friends. It doesn't mean we're not successful. And a marriage has got to be the same way. And so that's where you do have different roles. And when I say this is how we're going to do it in terms of the financial world or protection, that's how we're going to do it. When my wife says this room's going to be this color, that's how we're going to do it because that's her area. And so at the moment, I'm kind of forgetting the question, what it started with, but that's what I'm thinking. Oh, we were talking about intimacy, long-term intimacy. So
Yeah.
that's again where if you can stop where both of you are doing everything, okay, and you say, this is what I'm going to do, and this is what you're going to do, and I'm not going to bother you with my stuff. This is my area. Don't you worry about it, hon. I've got it. You don't have to. I'm going to take this off your plate. And then she does that for me. That
Absolutely.
is
It's
such a
this
beautiful thing.
reframing of like divide and conquer. So it's like,
Right.
what do you excel at? Where are your skills and where's your partner's skills and what are they the best at? And you each kind of divide and conquer life that way. I mean, think of how much further you can get in life if somebody's kind of taking over your weaknesses and you're taking over their weaknesses.
Absolutely. And the other thing I'm going to say, if you want lifetime intimacy, is going to be that you focus on positive interaction with this person. That means that sure, you're going to have disagreements, but choose your battles.
Mm.
Nowadays, it seems like everybody's just so aggressive when it comes to just being right about everything, getting their way about everything, or we've got to just get this off our chest. We've got to seek resolution to every little thing we ever talk about. When again, if we go back 50, 60 years ago, and especially hundreds of years ago, a couple might have a disagreement, but they didn't take that disagreement and say, oh, what does this tell me about the relationship? Are we doomed? They just said, we had a bad day. Oh, well, because a lot of their life was focused on, we need to eat tomorrow. It was on survival. And so the little things, they didn't put magnifying glasses on them.
Mm.
And there was no point in arguing. We're on the same side here. We're trying to feed ourselves and we're teammates and we need each other. And so that's another thing kind of in the modern world is that, and I think, to be honest with you, I think that there's sort of an agenda to make it this way, to make men and women not need each other.
Absolutely.
I think that that's the case, that's trying there, that there's an agenda out there pushing that, in my opinion. And so what are we going to do? We're going to make them both do everything that the other person used to do based on what women used to do and what men used to do. And we're going to have them both trying to do everything. Not only is that a lot more stressful, but then the question becomes, well, what do I need you for? And really, but the truth is we do need each other. We need each other now more than ever. And so when we look at it as, I want to serve you and I'm going to serve you with these things and you're going to serve me with these things, and we choose to need each other, we choose to depend on each other, and that's not codependency, that's interdependency.
Mm.
That's the healthy version, and it's basically where I'm going to let you make my life easier and I'm going to make your life easier. And if we can go back to that, and if you can remember that it all ties in together, being this person's peace, making this person's life easier, doing what you do best, letting them do what they do best, and just letting the rest kind of roll off your back, not starting arguments, letting things go. If you had a bad day to get together, it doesn't say anything about your relationship. You just had a bad day. It doesn't mean anything. Let it go. If you can do those things, then you should be able to have a permanent, lifelong marriage with this person. But it's the ones who complicate it. Nobody can do that forever. So remember, you've got to think long term. I can't keep this up long term if we're fighting all the time. But if we're being good to each other, helping each other out, I need that. It's not only that I can endure it, it's that I need that, and I'm better off.
Beautiful. Oh, yes, yes, yes to all of that. Now, when, two people commit to each other, to marriage and they move in together, that can be a, adjustment.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any advice around navigating kind of the balance between personal space and togetherness and that, kind of time when you do move in together, and kind of navigating that so it's as smooth as possible?
Well, you know, a lot of times if we're experienced in living with other people, so we've got a family, brothers and sisters, things like that, then a lot of the time it's helpful that way. And I'll go back to what I mentioned before. If when two people move into this house or this apartment, it's important to kind of have, this is what I'm going to take care of here, and you know, this is what you're going to take care of. This is what you bring to the table. This is what I bring to the table. First of all, what it does is it eliminates topics of argument, because if this is all my territory and you don't come, you know, get involved in it, that's one less argument we have to have. That's actually a lot more than one. That's dozens fewer arguments that we have to have. And if I don't get into kind of your territory, what you're taking care of, I just trust you, and I know you're going to do a good job with it. That's less stress. That's fewer arguments, because there's less for me to worry about. There's less for you to worry about because I've got this taken care of. That solves a lot right there. And of course, then we talk about, well, do we have friends over? How do you feel about that? Because just recently, one of my clients, for example, one of the big issues of contention was how many times they would have guests over. And she said, I don't ever feel like it's just us, where I can just be with him alone. It's like we always have these people around us. And so having some conversations about that's going to be helpful. So whereas, yeah, you can over communicate, you should communicate, but once you have, let it go and be done with it and don't overthink it. And you know, one of the other things is going to be, for example, if we have Christmas decorations this year, how important is that? Because I have, what's kind of comical is I remember speaking with this one couple, and they were just so stressed out with all these things, and I said, well, what's on your list? Like, well, what are you talking about? And they started naming these things, and one of them was it was the holidays, and they had all these plans, and family was coming in, all that, and the Christmas lights had to go up, and that was going to take. They weren't hiring. You know, a lot of people hire people to do that now, but they weren't going to do that, and the guy had been working on it for a couple of days, and she finally said, I don't care if we have Christmas lights or not. And he said, you don't. He said, I thought you wanted this. I've been, I took time off work. I've been working all day, you know, going up the ladder and nailing these things in and stapling them in. You don't even, she's like, oh, it's not that big of a deal to me. We don't have to have it at all. He's like, are you sure? Is this a trick? She's like, no, it's not a trick. She said, I don't care a thing about them. And it was like, wow, a simple conversation could
Yeah.
have saved 2 days, you know, this guy working on this. And it didn't even matter to her. And it
Like
didn't matter to him either.
resentment.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
didn't matter to him either. He thought she wanted to do it. And so don't ever be afraid to tell the other person, you know, we don't have, it doesn't have to be this complicated. We don't have to do it this way. You know, it doesn't have to, everything doesn't have to be to the nth degree and perfect. And we don't have to impress everybody. And so that's another thing I would suggest, is that when you do move in together, make sure that, first of all, that expectations are clear. Like, if you want to have kids, if this apartment's temporary, we want to get a house together, because then if you're not seeing this situation as permanent, you'll treat it differently, and there will be sometimes less stress. But that's where, if you will talk about future expectations long before you get married and move in together, that is so important, because what will happen a lot of times, people will fall in love, so to speak. And then what happens is you're in limerence, which I talk about a lot. Let's just call it the honeymoon stage of the relationship. And you can be in love with this person, and they can tell you things that you do not want for your future, but you won't care because the relationship feels so good. So then you get to the point where you're out of limerence and out of the honeymoon phase, and real life happens. And now these expectations they had that were very different from yours all of a sudden matter a lot more, and you can be in a problematic situation. So when I'm doing, and of course that's not insurmountable at all, but when I'm talking to a couple who, especially premarital type situations or couples who want to get engaged, that's one of the first things I'll ask them. What are your expectations concerning where you're going to live, children? What kind of lifestyle do you expect? Because those are things that, if they're not going to meet those expectations later on, you can get into a lot of issues. But if at least you understand the expectations, it doesn't mean that if you have different expectations that you have to break up.
Right.
But it does mean you need to know and you need to be aware, because sometimes I'm not big on breakups, but sometimes it's better to have the breakup before you get married. And sometimes that has to be the situation. But a lot of times, if you can just understand the expectations the other person has for the future, then the two of you can work together and compromise a little bit here and there, and you'll end up getting what you both want. And of course, the other thing is, in 5 years, you're probably going to have a whole different set of expectations anyway.
Right.
And I've had to go through that with some people here recently, where they were trying to hold the other person to these expectations they had when they were 20, and now they're 30.
They're a different person. They've gone through
Right.
5 iterations of themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's another reason why focus on the moment with this person. Focus on, we're going to have a quiet evening together. And that's your whole world. Because really, if you think about it, most people in your life could disappear. You could disappear. And it's not something they can't get over. If you're really close friends, it's going to be tough if they were to, God forbid, pass away or move to the other side of the world or something. But the person who affects you the most is the one you live with. And so focusing on one day at a time with them, not letting yourself think too far into the future, because that's what causes anxiety. We're really only designed, the way our minds work, to think a few seconds into the future. That's really all we're able to do. And we try to think weeks and months and years. And of course, you should have some of those expectations. But what I'm saying is that if you just focus on today, knowing that a lot of the problems that you think are coming up are going to be completely different or even gone in the future. If you realize that, and that really all you have is today, think of all the stress that takes off of you. You know, Jesus wasn't just the son of a God. He wasn't just the son of God. He was clearly a genius, because he said, don't worry about tomorrow. Today's got enough trouble. Can you imagine if marriages would just focus just today? What's on the agenda today? We're gonna pop popcorn and watch a movie on the couch. Or we're gonna sit down, we're gonna make a Christmas list for the kids. And that's it. That's all we're worried about right now. If you can learn to do that, then you will be amazed at how successful your marriage can be.
Ah, I love that. Oh, what's that saying that they say, stay in the present moment, because focusing on the past is depression and focusing on the future is anxiety.
Anxiety, absolutely. That's
Yeah.
right. And it's, a lot of us have even programmed ourselves, we can't stay in the moment. And that's one of the reasons the prescriptions for depression and anxiety are higher than they have ever been and continue to grow, is because our thought process is completely unnatural to how we're designed. It really is. And that's another thing that happens in relationships. I see so many breakups where people say, I just realized it wasn't going to work out long term. Why? And they can't give me a reason. But they will kind of do these scenarios in their head, and it's not even based on expectations, like I mentioned earlier. But a lot of relationships is because the other person thinks way too far ahead, when all you have is the moment. And like you said, you're going to change so much in the months, years ahead. Trying to project and figure out what you're going to want then is difficult.
Absolutely. Those are such great points. Yeah, I can relate to the friends over point. It's, you definitely need to know if you're an introvert and an extrovert, and if your partner's an introvert and an extrovert, because introverts, we get drained by lots of people around us, and extroverts, they thrive off that and they get energy from that. So that's definitely very important conversation to have with your partner. Now, let's talk about romance when we're in a long-term marriage. What are some great tips to keep romance alive?
Well, for starters, commit to frequent sex. And that's just one of those things that, like I said earlier, you have a response as a male and as a female. And those hormones, oxytocin is one of them. It's a bonding chemical. It's the same hormone that a mother produces when she's nursing a baby. It's a warm, connecting hormone. And the man is going to produce that as well. He's also going to produce vasopressin, which I mentioned earlier, which makes it feel like you're his. And so a lot of times I will tell wives, do you want to be his? Then you need to be his every day. And it's not just a release. It's not just something physical. There's a deep bonding that happens. And it really can start with, when you're married, it will start with that, because most of the couples that I work with, even when they commit to frequent, it doesn't have to be every day, but it's going to be a priority. And if we can, we will. We're going to work it in because it's important. It's amazing how the other aspects of romance seem to fall into place. The
Mm,
planning of a date night, which I'm really big on that. And again, because I have seen the benefit of some of these traditional roles, I'll tell guys, plan it. Don't say, hey, what do you want to do this weekend? Or I don't know, you want to go eat? Plan it and make it a surprise. When my wife, when I'm taking her out on date night, she doesn't know where we're going. I'll just tell her what time, and I'll say I'm going to be wearing this. That kind of tells her what she needs to wear, and she'll sometimes try. Where are we going? She'll try to figure it out. I'll say it's a surprise. I mean, it's a little fun we have, and I take it seriously. I see myself as kind of the master of ceremonies. I'm going to make a plan for what we're going to do, and it's going to be, usually it's not just going to eat and come back home. I try to do a couple things. Sometimes though, it's as simple as we're going to go eat and we're going to come back and have movie night in our pajamas. But I don't tell her what it is. I surprise her, and she really enjoys that. But a lot of guys that I talk to, they just kind of have date night by accident, and it's like, well, we'll get in the car and I don't know, we'll drive somewhere. Where do you want to go? And of course, at that point, most women I know get frustrated if it's like they don't want to have to make that decision. You don't even know where you're going to take me. You haven't planned this. It's a little bit hurtful. So I will tell guys that, like, treat it as though you're the one planning this out. And I know that a lot of them think they're being considerate by saying, where would you like to go? And of course, you're going to take her somewhere where you already know she likes to go. So that part's out of it. But and of course, sure, sometimes you're just going to say, do you have anywhere that you'd really like to go this weekend? But most of the time, if you can plan date night as the man, and sometimes, I tell the wives, you do it sometimes. Say, hey, I want to plan our night this weekend or this week. I want to do it. Of course. But it should be a regular thing. And the two of you should feel like that you're taking a break,
mm,
you're focusing on each other, and romance should be expected. And so one of the ways to keep it alive is to prioritize being together, making sure that you have that night. And, sometimes you can also make it kind of like it was when you were dating. And of course, I'm speaking of married couples right now, where he'll say, I'll pick you up at this time. So maybe that means after work.
right.
And she kind of needs to be ready. And he's going to go up to the front door. She's going to come out of the door. He's going to walk to the car, things like that. And of course, trips. I'm not I'm not the guy who just wants to travel all the time, but we enjoy going to beaches and going to the mountains and things like that. And it's where you can get away from things, you can focus on each other. And there are legitimate studies that show when couples do new things together, like take a cruise together, maybe to places that they've never been, that oxytocin I talked about
Mm,
earlier skyrockets,
wow.
as does dopamine. And so you can recreate some of the honeymoon phase that you had early on when it seemed like you were madly in love and this person could do no wrong. You can recreate that by doing things that are new that you two haven't done before, because a lot of that is connected to newness. When you're doing new things with someone, in some ways you're getting a new version of them because you've never been with them when this has happened. So seeing something you've never seen before, doing things like scuba diving or mountain climbing or things that you just haven't done before, it's going to really feel romantic. It's going to connect the two of you, and it's going to lead to things later like great sex, great date nights, great memories, great conversations. But also, the other thing I want to add with romance, it's difficult to feel romantic when you're stressed out, right?
Yeah.
It's difficult to feel that you want to connect with this person when you're exhausted and you're feeling anxiety. So, setting this up by being peace for this person, by making things easy, simple. With me, it's simple. With other people, they may make your life complicated. I'm going to make it easier. That's what can set up a lot of the romance that people want. So you already have this foundation of peace. You have this foundation of serving the other person in the ways that you can do best. And then you have situations where you're doing these different things. You're going on these trips. You have a regular date night. You do a lot of that, and you're going to be in a romantic marriage. You really are. And so if you just kind of follow that recipe, whether you intend to or not, you're going to be in a situation where you feel like the romance is very high and that you have a passionate and fun relationship to be in.
I love those. So it's making a time commitment to each other
Oh
weekly
yeah.
and, you know,
And see,
trips yearly. So you kind of have these things that you look forward to.
right, absolutely. Yeah. And so that's where, if you have these other things in place, it's a lot easier to do that. If you're both not, and again, if someone's hearing this and it's a woman who does have a career, I'm not saying that you're doing anything wrong. You have to decide that for yourself, what's going on with your marriage and what's going on with your family. But I can say this, when you both have careers and you're both going light speed in different directions, it's a little more difficult to plan trips. That doesn't mean you can't ever earn income or anything like that. But if you have this life centering career and he does as well, it's difficult to take those trips. So sometimes it's priority, and sometimes it's just your situation in life. I mean, a lot of us had moms who did have side jobs here and there, and it didn't mess us up because she was still a homemaker, but and she still provided nurturing and love for her children and her husband. And so even today, it doesn't mean that you have to just drop everything, but you do need to look at your priorities and see where maybe you could make some changes. And the thing is, it's going to be better for everybody involved. It really will be. I've seen it so much now that I'm extremely confident in it.
And like you said before, it's kind of this kind of mindset shift and value of your relationship is the foundation of your life. And it
Right.
comes first before everything else.
That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It needs to come
Now,
first.
we're always going to have conflict, or not conflicts, but there'll be things we need to work out. So what are some constructive ways to resolve things that might come up in long-term marriages?
Well, the first would be, in my opinion, it would be that you don't ever forget who this person is. And what I mean is that when you start questioning their intentions, things like that, you need to make sure you're giving them the benefit of the doubt. And you need to remember this person has been by you and it hasn't always been smooth sailing, but here they are. How many people have left? How many friends do you not hear from anymore? How many friends completely abandoned you? How many people, maybe in relationships you had in the past, just left you high and dry, walked out on you while you were crying? And here this person is, and they've stayed with you. Don't ever forget that. So when you're arguing, don't let yourself see them as having bad intentions or see them as that they're mistreating you or they're not thinking of you first. Assume the best. And I
Mm.
really mean that. Assume the best, because most of us, when we are making decisions, we actually will oftentimes think in a better way than our actions suggest. And what I mean is that sometimes I'll do something and I'll think there's no problem here. This is fine. And it's because I didn't consider a certain detail. And my wife, rather than turning me into a bad person, will say, what if we did it this way? Would that be okay? And then it's like, oh, I didn't think about that. That would be much better. She doesn't tell me, well, you're inconsiderate or you didn't think of me, because she knows that I did. But she also knows I'm busy. She knows that I don't necessarily have everything coming to me in that moment in my mind, every factor involved. And so she gives me the benefit of the doubt. And I do too. I give her the benefit of the doubt. I know she's a wonderful human being. She's the best, the most wonderful person I have ever known. And so when something comes up that I think, well, that wasn't super considerate, I remember who I'm thinking about. And I'm like, impossible. She had to consider everything she had in the moment, and she made a decision. But we can talk this through. I can make suggestions, or I can say we really need to do it this way. And because we respect each other and we see each other as this is the one who stood by me, we give the benefit of the doubt. And so that's rule number one. You've got to give the benefit of the doubt. The other thing is get on their side of the table. You have a conversation with someone and you're right across from them. Sometimes it's friendly, but a lot of times that's what you do in your adversaries. So always feel like you're on the same side of the table. We're on the same team. We have the same goals, and we are both wanting what's best for the other. It makes it where instead of an argument, it's just a discussion and it's figuring it out together. And then when both of you have said all you need to say, someone needs to make a decision. and decide who that is. And if it's based on my responsibility, I make the decision. If it's based on yours, you do. And if not, we might talk about it a little bit more, but one of us is going to have to make the decision. And when that happens, then the other person needs to just go with it, support it. And if you can do that, you're going to be in a great situation. But so many people nowadays, really, there's this idea that we have to be right, we have to be heard, we have to get this off our chest. And it really goes back to something that my mom told me when I was a kid. I'm sure you heard it when you were a kid, and it's been said for many, many, many years. If you can't say something nice, just don't say anything. You don't have to get everything off your chest, believe it or not. A lot of times, I go through that too. I'll think, oh, I'm mad. I need to say this right now. Most of the time, the next day, I'm glad that I didn't, especially when you're dealing with people you love. It's okay. Just keep it. Oh, we say, don't keep it bottled up inside. And that's true for some things, but other things, again, we're in a world now that's we've made so complex and difficult, and we've overanalyzed relationships. We've overanalyzed everything, and so we tend to think that what is happening in this moment, this is the most important thing in the universe, when it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And just like you said, days, weeks later, we're going to not even think about it the same way. There are disagreements my wife and I have had, especially when we were newlyweds. That what's funny is I am completely opposed to what I thought then. So how silly is it that I made it out to be such a big deal when I wasn't even going to feel the same way in the future? So it's about knowing who you're married to and that they stand beside you, giving them the benefit of the doubt, being on the same team. This is not your opponent. This is not your enemy. This is your teammate, and you're doing life together, and they deserve to be treated like a teammate. And just remember, whenever you get angry and you start thinking you want to be right or you want it done this way, you're talking to a teammate here. And really, you need to be focusing on how the two of you can uh, can achieve the best result for the both of you. And if you look at it that way, it makes things a lot easier. But we tend to see everybody today as potentially adversaries, and we store a lot of resentment from the past with relationships and even with our spouse. But if we can really get that teammate mindset and not an adversarial mindset, oh, we're so much better off.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. Just automatically, if our automatic reaction is thinking that they had bad intentions, that's if we can shift that, like you said, I mean, that is a big deal. That is a huge shift.
And
Um,
one of the things is going to be, a lot of times when you have kids, you're gonna have headbutts with your kids. You're gonna have difficulty and some disagreements because as they get older, they want more freedom and they don't want to be told what to do and things like that. But always be on the same page. And if they are ever disrespectful to your spouse, you step in. So don't you speak to your father that way. Don't you speak to your mother that way. That's not how you talk to them. You defend each other. You step in the line of fire, so to speak. And of course, as a man, as a husband, I see my role as personifying that a lot more. That's being a protector, especially in today's world. I told someone recently, I take it seriously and I embrace it. I'm her bodyguard. That's how I see it. Nobody's going to mess with her, not while I'm around. And so again, we're on the same team. We are a unit, and nobody messes with either one of us, or you're going to hear from the other. And that's really how it should be. And I see people will take sides against their spouse with their mom, with their close friend. One of the sad jokes we have in the relationship coaching world is we'll say single girls make girls single and single guys make guys single. And a lot of times they will kind of wish they had more time with you, and they will kind of go after your person a little bit and even try to get you to take a stance against them. And sometimes family will do this. And that's something that we don't do. I mean, even if she's wrong, you don't get to say she's wrong. This is none of your business. you know, that's my wife. And I'm the one who's standing in the way, and I always will be. And that's how it should be.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a great point with the children as well. I've seen it the opposite way where one of the spouses doesn't stand up and put the children, kind of defend their spouse for the ways the children are behaving, and that just creates lack of boundaries for children, and it's just a mess. Going back to sexual connection, that you talked about how important it is, do you have any specific strategies when you work with your clients to maintain that? I mean, I know some people talk about scheduling it, or agreeing to a certain amount per week. I mean, do you have any kind of specifics around that?
Well, a lot of people have found that they are so much closer when they see it basically as something that they're going to try to make happen every day. And for some people, that sounds impossible.
Hmm.
But again, when you simplify your life, it's amazing how you have time for things you didn't have time for before. But if you decide that it's a priority and that it's going to be, and you kind of get a minimum number, and sometimes, especially if you're dealing with one spouse who has a lesser sex drive than the other, you kind of have to decide, okay, what's the ideal amount in a week? How many times, do you feel like you would be happy with this and you would feel loved and supported, and that we could do this? And so that's important, to just have that conversation, and then stick to it. Treat it as seriously as you would maintenance for your car or anything else that requires some sort of pre-planning. And this is far more important than that. It's your marriage, but it needs maintenance and upkeep, just like it needs date night, just like you need to take little trips together. And so when you look at that as, this is something that has to happen. And a lot of times when people realize just what happens to a relationship when you're having frequent sex, it's difficult to argue with someone that you're having sex with every day. I mean, I'm just going to put that out there. You really feel warmth and connection to them because of that intimate act. And so being able to prioritize it is actually kind of a superpower. It's a cheat code for a lot of marriages. And, I would say that, yeah, I mean, you definitely do want to communicate on this. You also want to keep an element of playfulness to it. A lot of times, couples, I have found, clinicalize it a little bit, and that's because they talk too much about it instead of putting more emphasis on doing it. And it might sound counterintuitive, but sometimes when you are talking about it a whole lot and you're not getting anywhere, one of the best things you can do is to stop talking about it and to focus more on action. And I think that it's important that couples try to have a sexual connection every day, even if it doesn't mean that they're having sex. So for example, if they're texting, we all know how we can text and be playful with our spouse. There's things that you can do there. And if you can kind of keep that connection, even if it's not going to happen that day, it's a great distraction. It's a great escape from life. And that's one of the things it's there for, is that this event that is just so profound in human life, because it's what procreates life. It's what connects these two people. It's a fascinating event. And if you have that with another person, and it's something that you see that they are prioritizing, that they're choosing to make important, it's really, in many ways, can be a preventative for divorce. Because if you are satisfied in that area, it's a lot more difficult to be distracted with anyone else, because your mind tends to wander back to this person. And because it's frequent, it's going to happen today or tomorrow or the next day, something like that. And so you don't feel neglected, and you don't feel that you're not being fulfilled in that area. And so you do need to talk about it, because if you're not doing it every day, you need to know kind of what's acceptable and what your spouse needs. And that may take some time, especially if you're newlyweds, but you do need to kind of figure it out, because you don't want the other person to at all feel that you're rejecting them, or that you don't love and desire them, or that you're just not putting their needs in a place that's important in life. And so having some conversations about that, but also you've got to take action to keep it going. So the flirty texts and things like that, even with your spouse, it's going to be important. And when you plan trips, plan the lingerie, plan those things, and be playful about it. Give little hints. I'm going to be bringing this on the trip, and be playful. I'll tell the husbands, what are you bringing that for? Just be kind of playful about it. but plan it just like you would anything else that's important. And when you do that, typically things are going to fall into place. And of course, if we're talking about specific sexual problems, uh, there are professionals out there who can help with that. But usually, if the other person feels like that it's a priority for you and that you want them to feel fulfilled, you want them to know that you desire them, and both feel that way, and it's part of your daily routine. It's not something that it's only during certain times, but that sex is just part of your daily life because that's how connected you are to the other person. Even if you don't feel that way at the moment, if you can make adjustments and work toward that, you'll be amazed at how both of you will feel fulfilled in that, and how much closer you'll be, how much less you will argue and bicker, how much more romantic both of you will be, and how much softer. And what I mean by softer is just with my wife, for example, this might sound kind of odd to some people, but in the last 4 or 5 years, we might have had 2 or 3 disagreements, 2 or 3 arguments where it was semi-heated. And most of that is because we appreciate each other so much and we're so committed to being peace for the other person that it's not my first thought to disagree or to argue. It's a different kind of discussion when you just really cherish the other person. It's more like, oh, okay, so why do you think that? Okay, I see now. So you think that that would work better? I'm not real sure. That's kind of how the conversation would go. And it's not like, well, no, we're not going to do that. That's stupid, or things like that. It's not adversarial. And so when you do a lot of the things that I've been talking about in this interview, that's the situation that you get into, to where your first response is not to attack. And that's the same when it comes to sex. If you know the other person has your best interest at heart and loves you and wants to show you that they desire you and that they're putting you first, it makes everything else easier, and it changes the way that you view them and the way that you interact with them. And so if it's one of those things where, like the famous football coach Nick Saban says, if you focus on the process,
Hmm.
the results will take care of themselves. And so many married couples are not doing that. They're not focusing on the process. They're obsessed with the results in the future. But if they turned that focus to the process, then they would get a lot of what they want in marriage without really having to do these difficult things that sometimes people suggest we have to do in a relationship.
Right. It's that present moment. Now, if one person in the relationship has broken trust and they're wanting to work through it, what are some good strategies to work through that and get back to, repair that trust? Is this kind of a situation where professional help would be kind of necessary, or are there good steps that you would recommend?
Well, for starters, when someone's broken trust and they want to restore that, they can't be defensive, and they have to be willing to open up. Okay. And I know that sounds just kind of vague, but I'm going to be specific. So, for example, if someone has had an affair or cheated, and the two have decided that they do want to try to save this and to stay married and move forward together. Let's say it's the guy, and he says, hey, I'm going to go have a drink with the guys. Then he should have no problem whatsoever with her FaceTiming him and saying, hey, just wanted to check on you. And he'd say, yeah, I'm here. And he holds the phone up. She can see his face, shows who's in the room. We're just all hanging out. Just that reassurance. When you take away the ego of that, and some people that I've spoken to, they're no, I shouldn't have to do that. Either she forgives me or she doesn't, or either he forgives me or she doesn't. It doesn't work that way, because when you have shown that you were not trustworthy at that time, it is perfectly reasonable to have to redeem yourself in some ways, to prove yourself in some ways. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And it should be that way until the other person feels comfortable with it. And you know what? They might be insecure for a time. And people, oh, don't be insecure. Don't be insecure. Well, if you don't have a reason to be insecure, you shouldn't be insecure. But when you have violated trust like that, the other person has a reason to be insecure. And so your response should be one of humility and patience and of proving yourself. And I know that that's not really a popular phrase, but sometimes you have to in life. You have to prove yourself again. And it won't be forever, but for a time, just being willing to let the other person check because you did lie about where you were going. If you were in that situation, you would have, and some other things. And so a lot of it lies on the person who wants the forgiveness. They have to be willing to demonstrate that they deserve the forgiveness, because if you're just going to go to the same thing again, of course you don't deserve it. So prove yourself and don't be afraid to do that, and do not belittle the other person for wanting that, because they deserve it. So that's really kind of the simplicity when you have broken trust, is to prove yourself and be willing to let the other person, hey, you want to see my phone? No problem. You can go through my phone. And the real red flags are when people get really upset about that, and you don't trust me. Well, I don't know. Should I trust you? And so the answer, when someone doesn't trust you, we tend to turn and make them the villain, when really, especially if you're in a marriage, it's about proving yourself when you need to. Like I said, you want to give the other person the benefit of the doubt, but when they have clearly desecrated what you had by cheating or something like that, there will be a time when you need to prove yourself again. And then you'll get that benefit of the doubt. It should come. But at least for a time, don't be afraid to open up and kind of be willing to let the other person see for themselves. That's, if you do that part, you've got 90% of it.
Oh, that was great. I really enjoyed this conversation. It's been so enlightening. For those that are listening that would like to reach out to you or find your work or find more information about you, where can we do that? And do you have any other resources available for those? I know you have your YouTube, you have some books, etc. What else do you have for us out there to learn more?
Well, marriageradio.com is my website for married couples. And there's a lot of articles and videos that are really helpful. There's information about workshops I have. I have a workshop for marriages in crisis. That's where one or both of them want out of it. Sometimes they're even in an affair. And this person saying, how can I get this person back? They've left and they're with this other person. And that workshop is called Relationship Reignite. And there's information at marriageradio.com, but you can also just go to relationshipreignight.com. It's an intense workshop. It's 3 days long. It's for couples who are really in trouble. And so, if that's you, you can go there. You can also just go to, if you're in a dating relationship or you've had a breakup, you can go to myexbackcoach.com. That's myexbackcoach.com. And you can always just go to YouTube and type in Coach Lee, and you'll see the blonde guy, and that's me. And I've got several hundred videos now that are up, and a lot of those are going to be helpful to you if you're having relationship trouble, or if somebody's broken up with you and you want to know, is it possible to get back together with them? And if so, what can I possibly do? Got a lot on that. So those are some places you can find me and get some more information and get some help with what you're going through.
Beautiful. And do you have any quick, you mentioned you do have your course for relationships that are in trouble. What would be some kind of key red flags of when somebody needs to reach out to something like that?
When someone needs to reach out?
Yeah, get professional help.
To me. Okay,
Yeah.
sure. Well, usually they're going to know, but if you feel like that you don't have peace in the relationship, if there's a lot of lies, if you suspect the other person's having an affair, you're usually right. Just so you know, I have private investigators. Private investigators have consulted with me when we're trying to determine if an affair is going on. And I usually, with a few questions, can know for sure. But if you're suspicious, there's usually a good reason for that. So that would be one thing. If you have been broken up with and it just doesn't make any sense at all, sometimes it can be based on situations. It can be based on even emotional difficulty the person's going through. But there's things you should do and things you shouldn't do. So if you have been broken up with, especially recently, I would suggest you hop on YouTube and watch some of my videos, because there's a lot of things you can do wrong, so to speak, that can really push this person away and make it where it's impossible to reunite. When sometimes a lot, I would even say often, these breakups can be resolved. People can get back together. I see it every day. As a matter of fact, multiple times a day, I get emails or messages on Instagram or things like that where people are telling me they got back together. Usually it's several dozen every day that I'm hearing from. So there are things you can do that can give you a chance. And if it's a breakup, then you definitely need to watch some of my videos. But if you think there are red flags, usually there are. And if a lot of what I've described today, if you're thinking, oh, that sounds wonderful, but I don't have anything near that, then you should check out some of my material. And marriageradio.com is a great place to start because there's a lot of content there.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. All those links will be posted below. Highly recommend his YouTube channels and all his social media as well. He's got all his videos there. They're so helpful. I've watched many of them. So thank you so much for joining me today. This has been an incredible conversation. Really appreciate you and all your knowledge.
Thank you for having me, Christy, so much.
If you like this video, please like and share it with others. This information could really help someone you may know. And if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button to be sure you don't miss out on our future shows. And I'll see you all next Wednesday on the next episode of Discovering True Health.